boys and girls, so today we're going over Unit 7, Lesson 5, which is increasing and decreasing intervals. Before we get started, just make sure that your name is written down at the top, and let's begin. We look at the do now. It says a ball is thrown into the air from the edge of a 48-foot high cliff so that it eventually lands on the ground. The graph below shows the height, which is y, of the ball from the ground after x seconds. The path of the ball is shown in the graph to the right. Okay, after it says I have to answer some of these questions, all right? So before I get to the questions, I want to really evaluate this graph based on the information that they just gave me. If a ball is thrown from a height of 48 feet, well, here's where the ball is, and it's getting launched from 48 feet up into the air, and then it eventually comes back down and lands on the ground here, okay? So if I'm reading this question carefully, it tells me that the height is represented by the y-axis. Let me fill that in on the side here. Here's my y-axis, so this is going to be my height of the ball, all right? And then as I continue reading, it says that x represents my seconds. Here's my x-axis down below. This is going to be my seconds, all right? So we really want to label the graph first, all right, before we continue on. All right. So as I look at part A, it says state the domain of the graph. Well, domain is going to be a key word here. Domain tells me to look at my x values. And I know that x moves left to right, okay? So I want to look at my point that's all the way to the left on the graph and my point that's all the way to the right on the graph, which is over here. And I want to drop it down to look at what x values are representing those points, all right? So I can see that this is going to be the x value of 0. What number is right in between 5 and 6? Does anybody know? Oh yeah, it's going to be 5.5. So I know that my domain moves from 0 seconds all the way over to 5.5 seconds. So that's what I want to write down. My domain is from 0 to 5.5. Now, these are points that are plotted on my graph. So I'm going to say that they are included, so I'll use brackets to do that. All right. Now as we look at part B, it says, which interval is the ball's height always decreasing? That is huge. And then it says label this part of the graph with the letter B. So decreasing. Well, here's my ball. It got launched into the air. That means the ball is going up, 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 until this point right up top. That's when it starts to decrease until it finally hits the ground. So this is where I am decreasing. I want to label that with the letter B because that's what the question tells me to do. Part C says which interval always shows where the ball is increasing. I'm going to highlight that out in orange. And again, here's my ball. It's going up, 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 up into the air, okay, until it finally starts to go back down. So where I labeled in orange, where I highlighted out really, that's where I am increasing. It says to label that with the letter C. So here is my letter C. So now I have to state what is going to be the interval where I decrease, what's going to be the interval where I increase. Okay, anytime I'm talking about increasing or decreasing, these also are always going to be x values. Label this with me on your notes, guys. Increasing or decreasing, you are always looking at the x values to answer this question. So if I look at in yellow where I'm starting to decrease, well, this is the point right up top where I start to decrease. This is actually my vertex. It's my turning point. So from this value all the way down in yellow, that's where I am decreasing. But again, I want to look at what x values are being represented by those points. Well, what number is right in between 2 and 3? Yeah, you got it. It's going to be 2.5. So I can see that I am decreasing from 2.5 all the way over to 5.5. So that's what I'm going to write down in interval notation, 2.5 to 5.5. And this is something that needs to be memorized. Anytime that you are increasing or decreasing, that is always represented with parentheses. All right, just be aware of that. So that's the decreasing section. Now I want to look at where I'm always increasing. That was the orange. Well, I can see that this orange first point here is being represented by the x value of 0. and I am increasing all the way up and over until this vertex, my turning point, which is represented by the x value 2.5. So what's the interval going to be? It's going to be from 0 to 2.5. And just like I said before, you always represent these intervals with parentheses. All right, let's jump into the notes underneath here. It says increasing and decreasing intervals. Do not read the numbers off the y-axis, okay? You are not going to look at the y, you are only going to look at the x. We always read the intervals from the x-axis, and we read left to right, just like you would in a book. Okay, a function is increasing, it's increasing if as the x value increases, again, reading left to right, the y value should also increase as well. And a function is decreasing if as the x value increases, again from left to right, the y value is now decreasing. If I look back at my do now, this is what it's saying. If I am increasing, that means x goes up and y goes up. So here I was increasing, my y values go up, okay, going up, 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 and my x values go up. My x values increase, both increase. If I'm decreasing, like in yellow, I can see here that my x values are still going up. My x values still increase, but this yellow section, my y values, they're going down. They are decreasing, which is what we wrote here, okay? There's an example diagram at the bottom here of increasing, decreasing, what's a constant, things like that. So I can see this graph is going up, 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 like a roller coaster. Reading left to right, I can see I'm going up. This is constantly staying at that value of 1. Again, I'm increasing again, and then I'm finally dropping down if this was a roller coaster if I'm reading left to right. All right, let's flip and go to the next page here. All right, so as we look at example 1, it says a swim team member performs a dive from a 14-foot high springboard. The parabola below shows the path of her dive. Well, here she is. She's so cute. She is ready with a big smile on her face. She's about to dive off that board up into the air and back down into the pool. All right, it says write the interval where she is increasing. I'm going to highlight the word increasing out in yellow. That's a key word that we just went over on the last page. And when I think increasing, I should be thinking what x values show where I'm increasing. Well, here she is. She's on the diving board. She leaps into the air, right? She jumps into the air until she hits that vertex, that turning point up top. All right, so from here to here, I can see she is increasing. I'm going to put an I here, all right? And again, if I want to look at what interval that is, I really want to look at what x values those are. X is located on that bottom axis here. So I'm going to drop down an arrow to my x-axis. Again, I'm going to drop down an arrow to my x-axis. Well, I can see the first x value is 0. So she's increasing from 0 all the way to, well, what number is in between 2 and 4? Yeah, it's going to be the number 3. So she's increasing from 0 to 3. And again, that is highlighted out in yellow right here. And anytime you increase or decrease, you represent that with parentheses in your interval notation. Next, it says write the interval where she is always decreasing. So I'm going to highlight that out in blue. Again, when I see decreasing, box this out with me, guys. I should again be thinking what x values represent that. And here I go. She's at her maximum height, and then she starts to fall back down into the pool. Okay, and this section of the graph I'm going to label with a D for decreasing. All right, so again, what x values represent that? Well, again, I'm going to look at my turning point, my vertex, drop it down to my x values, and she ends right over here. So I'm going to drop that down to an x value as well. So I can see this blue decreasing section is from 3 to 8. So that's what I'm going to write, 3, 8. And again, we always use parentheses to represent increasing or decreasing. All right, done. Let's look at number 2. It says Gabe graphed the function f of x as shown below. So here's his function. State the interval where it is always increasing. That's my key word. Let's highlight it out. I also want to go back with a box and write that I should be looking at my x values to answer this question. Well, think about a roller coaster. Think about reading a book, okay? You get on left to right. You read left to right. So here is where it is always going to be increasing because I want to see where I'm going up, okay? I'm going to actually label that with an I. All right. So where am I always increasing? Well, I want to look at the x values that represent that. So as I look at the x-axis right here, you're thinking it's going to be a -2, but it's actually not. Because look at this point. It's an arrow. It's an arrow. Okay? So it's not going to be -2 or -3 or -4. It's going to be negative infinity because we know arrows represent negative infinity. Comma, again, here's a turning point up top. What x value is being represented by that turning point, right? All the way to my yellow for that increasing section. This is the x value +1. So I'm going to say I'm increasing from negative infinity to +1, and I'm going to use parentheses to show that. All right, let's look at number 3. It says the graph below represents the parabolic path of a ball kicked by a young child. Write the interval for which the diver's height is increasing. It also says we want to write the interval for which the diver's height is decreasing. All right, so just like we were doing before, I want to highlight out my keywords here. So at first I want to see where he is increasing. That's going to be one color. Then I want to go back and I want to see where he is decreasing, and I'm going to represent that with a different color. Okay, regardless of which word I am locating, both of these tell me that I should be looking at the x values, okay, to answer this question. So I'm going to say where he's always going to be increasing because it's a ball, it's getting kicked in the air. So right here it's on the ground, okay, that's the height in feet. Here's my height, which would be 0. Here's my time, which would be 0. So this is 0 feet, 0 seconds. It's on the ground. Then it gets kicked up, 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 up into the air. Ooh, ooh. All right. This is going to be where the ball is increasing. It increases until it hits that maximum point right up top. This is going to be my vertex or my turning point, okay? And then after it hits that highest value, then it has to turn and start descending right back down to earth. All right, guys, so this is where it is going to be decreasing. Again, I want to put a little I here just to remind myself that's where it's increasing, and a D over here, this is where it is decreasing. Okay, just like always, we look at the x values to answer the question. So I'm going to drop an arrow straight down to my x-axis for where I'm increasing. Same thing from my x-axis. I want to drop an arrow right down so I can see what x value represents this point and this point. Okay, again, this is time in seconds. This would be 0 seconds because nothing has happened yet. But as I look at the x-axis, it is not labeled. There's no scale, so I'm going to have to fill that in myself. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So 3. So it looks like I'm increasing from 0 to 3. Again, I'm looking at this yellow section. So from 0 to 3, increasing and decreasing always gets parentheses. So I'm done. Now I want to go back for the decreasing. Again, I want to look at that blue highlighted section of my parabola. So I can see here that I'm starting to decrease at the x value 3. And I go all the way down to this x value over here. Again, I don't know what it is, so I have to fill in the rest of my scale. So this is 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6, okay? So it looks like I am decreasing from 3 to 6. So I'm going to write that down. And again, I always use parentheses to represent that. All right, let's flip and look at number 4. Here we go. Number 4, it says, would you characterize the function as increasing or decreasing on the domain interval -5 is less than x, which is less than -1? Explain your reasoning. Okay, I'm going to highlight out what's important here. They're asking me if the function is going to be increasing or decreasing depending on the domain. When you hear domain, what do you think of? Oh yeah, that's right. We should be thinking of our x values, our x-axis. All right, so it's telling me that the domain is when x is in between -5 and -1. So on my x-axis, I want to check where is -1. It's right over here. Okay, and where is -5? That's going to be to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be right here. Okay, so this is the section of the graph that I want to look at. So I'm actually going to highlight that out so it's very clear to see. Okay, and again, it's asking me, would I say that that's increasing or would I say that's decreasing? Well, if you remember from the notes earlier in the lesson, we had said that just like when you read a book, you read a graph left to right. So if I'm over here on the left-hand side and I want to make my way over here to the right-hand side, do you notice how I am going up, 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 up to get from left to right? This would be an increasing interval. Put an I here for me. All right, and then we're going to actually write that down as our answer on the side. I would say that this interval is increasing. And then it says explain your choice. Well, there's a few different ways you could explain your answer. I'm going to use the notes again from the first page, and I'm going to say it's increasing because, okay, I'm just going to write B/C to shorten that up, because the y values increase. I want to look at really the height of that graph. Height is up and down, so I can see that my height is increasing. It's going up, 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 up. Versus if I look at this next section of the graph where I did not highlight, this is always decreasing because this y values are going down, 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 down. All right, so just be aware of that. That's how you would read the graph. All right, at this point, I want you boys and girls to try example 5 on your own. That's going to combine a ton of different topics that we've gone over at this point and put them all together in one question. So take your time. I know that it says to draw the graph of this function here, the y equals -x squared plus 8x minus 11. I suggest you type this into your graphing calculator and you create an XY table somewhere on this question. Okay, I'm going to put mine down here. You guys can do, the same thing, put it on the side, but that's what I suggest you do to get those values that you want to plot so you can create the graph. And then after you have that function plotted, then you can answer these questions on the side. All right, boys and girls, so here we go with number 5. It says draw the graph of the quadratic function. I'm going to highlight out that keyword with you now, quadratic. So that means that it's either going to look like a happy face or maybe a frowny face. I can always tell what it will look like based on the coefficient that's right in front. And I can see here the coefficient in front is a -1. So because it is negative, I know that it should be a frowny face, which it is after I graph. All right, so the first thing that I did is I typed this function into my y equals on the calculator, and I wrote down my table of values at the bottom. Now, if you remember, we've been talking about how we want those table of values to be symmetric. It's symmetric, woogie, 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 right? So if I look up top, we got -4, -4. Then we got 1, 1. Then we got 4, 4 with a 5 in the middle, okay? So we know that this turning point is really known as our vertex. Okay, and then we have all these other values that we need to plot to create that quadratic function. All right, so here we go. I graphed all those points, I connected, I got my graph. Now I'm going to answer the questions. It says, what is the maximum height? Well, here is the maximum height. I can either write it 2 ways. One is writing it as a coordinate point. This is the maximum, which is +4, +5. Or I could write it down as a y value, because when you think height, you should be thinking up and down, and it's the y-axis that moves up and down, and this is a y value of 5. Okay, so one or the other would be correct. Next, it says, what is the axis of symmetry? Well, if something is symmetric, that means it looks exactly the same on both sides when you cut it down the middle. So if I highlight out this blue line straight down the middle, I know that's going to be my axis of symmetry. And that's going to be the equation x equals 4 because it's hitting my x-axis at the value of 4. Next, it says state where it's always increasing and decreasing. So I highlighted increasing in yellow, highlighted decreasing in orange. And again, anytime that I'm increasing or decreasing, I always want to look at those x values. So here's a point that is on my graph. Normally, we would want to drag this up to see what x value that's going to be, but is this a point, boys and girls, or is that an arrow? Yeah, it's an arrow. Arrows tell me that these are going to go on forever. Okay, so I'm going to be going to the left to the left, those x values, forever. So it's not -1 or -2 or -3, it's negative infinity. All right, so reading left to right, it's negative infinity all the way to +4. Again, left to right, we have negative infinity all the way to the right, which we had said was going to be +4. All right, and then when I want to see where I'm decreasing again, it's starting at +4, but then again, I'm going to the right forever because again, I see this arrow. So I'm not going to say that this is going to be, an x value of positive, 8. It's going to be an x value of positive infinity because it goes on forever from 4 to infinity. All right, let's look at the very last page here. We have our closure at the top. Make sure that you guys answer that completely using interval notation. You need to use brackets or parentheses. It depends on what the question is asking. And then at the bottom, you have your homework question. Okay, you just have to answer those questions based on the graph. All right, have a great day.